somewhere. Hi, Steve. Steve came out to TransLink a few weeks ago and helped us in some Agile training. We cycled almost 40 staff in my department and across our business technology services team through Agile training. And Steve said, you guys did some Agile projects at TransLink recently, right? So why don't you come out and talk a little bit about what Agile means in the public sector, and that's why we're here. So I represent the business technology PMO at TransLink. We've got currently 10 PMs, project coordinator in my team. And Greg, to my right, was a PM in my team. He managed one Agile project which actually goes live on Monday. So there's a lot of really fresh information on Greg's brain, and I managed the project Agile which went live about 2 years ago. So I've been in project management for about 17, 18 years. Greg has been in PM for a really long time, and we're here to talk to you about as project managers. I am not a software developer. I'm not a QA analyst. I am a project manager, and I'm very passionate about using project management to deliver value to my customers. And what we're going to cover in our session this afternoon is talk about 2 real-life examples. Okay. So I want to make this session really interactive. We're a pretty small group, so I thought I'm not going to defer the Q&A to the end. As we go through our presentations, I'm going to pause and ask you guys, to shoot any questions that you might have at us. Okay, so don't shy from, don't be too critical, but ask any questions you might have. So the first project that I'm going to talk about is what we call TransLink's real-time transit information project, which is an external customer-facing project. It affected, I think, in a very positive way, all our customers in the Lower Mainland. So it's externally facing, and Greg is going to talk about the so-called online sign-up assistant project, which is really primarily internally facing to our bus operators. Okay? So I want to start out with a few questions. How many software developers are there in the room? Show of hands.
Does X software developer count?
Sure. Now I know why I hardly understood anything in the last presentation. How many project managers are there in the room? Come on, guys. All right, great, awesome. Okay. How many folks are from the Lower Mainland? Right? Who has never heard about TransLink? Yeah? One? Good, okay. So for all the other guys in the room, I'm going to teach you a lot about TransLink today that you haven't heard. Because when I joined TransLink 5 years ago, what I learned, what you read in the paper, is usually not what's really happening on the inside. And that's the first lesson for me as a project manager at TransLink. What you see on the inside is not what you read on the front page of the Vancouver Sun. Okay? So yesterday, as I was walking through downtown Vancouver, I was dreaming about this picture. I was pitching myself over in Maui, happy path PMO, right? It's all tranquil, it's all, really sunny, no rain, no rainstorm, right? Happy path PMO. But my reality in projects is a little bit more like that. That's a picture I took up north of Pemberton, Joffrey Lake. That's the trail I happened to hike up to a little peak there. And that for me is really the project reality that I see in my projects. It's not sexy. It's tough work. You're down there in the trenches. There's a lot of stuff thrown at me as a PM. It's definitely not linear. It's tough work. But when the project is done, you look back from the top what you accomplished. That's a picture I took just a few weeks ago up on the North Shore on Crown Mountain. And that's a picture I took up at Joffrey again, looking back to the summit that I climbed early in the day. So I want to start with that metaphor. That for me is really project management. It's not happy path. It's a lot of grunt work. It's not linear. but at the end, when you did it and you look back, it actually really is rewarding. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about TransLink. I would assume that most of you guys know that TransLink is a transit agency. Right? We deliver transit service in the Lower Mainland. You probably know that we run buses, we run trains, we run a ferry across Burrard Inlet. You probably don't know that we also run a cycling program. We're responsible for 4 major bridges in the Lower Mainland. We run a transit police force. Hopefully you've never met them personally. So TransLink is really big. It's a big organization. Not going to read out all those numbers, but a few things that you want to know is that TransLink has about 6,500 employees. It's a large enterprise. On the bus side, we have around 3,500 bus operators who run 1,400 or so buses across 1,400 bus routes. Yeah. We have over 640,000 passengers on our buses every single day. It's a big organization. And when you run a big transit system like that, things sometimes don't go as you expect them to go. It's a large organization. We take in about 1.42 billion in revenue. Interesting note there is that only a third of our revenue actually comes from the transit revenue. That's why the media always focuses on those other revenue sources, which are obviously very, shall I say, politically charged in the Lower Mainland. And that's why TransLink is so much in the news as we try to expand the service and put good service out in our region. In the last decade, from 2000 to 2012, we grew our transit ridership by 84%. So in 2012, look at the numbers from the last report, we had 239 million transit trips in our system a year. In 2012 alone, we added 6 million trips. And that is done with using existing resources. No more buses, no more routes, using the resources that we have in place. So the message that I'm conveying here is that it's a big, busy system, and there's a lot happening.
Just a very quick question.
Sure.
Because you're doing numbers here. How does that equate to the difference in population?
A lot of it has to do with population growth, for sure. I live in Richmond. It's probably running a little bit behind population growth, I would say. It depends on the region. So for example, I live in Richmond. Canada Line came online and just before the Olympics. It's about 110 to 120 passengers every single day. So there was a huge growth in service and in passengers every day. It really depends where you are in the region. Right. So I'm going to talk about the first Agile project that we ran at TransLink. It started in spring 2011 and it was wrapped up in May 2012. And that was the first full cycle Agile project we ran at TransLink. Sometimes things don't go as planned, right? That could have been you yesterday at 5 p.m. standing out there in the rain at a bus stop wondering what's going on. What we always say is our passengers, they all stand on the curb and they all look like that. And they ask themselves a number of questions. What's going on? I really feel like I'm out there and being left in the rain and I have no idea what's going on, right? So I'm not sure how many transit riders, bus passengers are in the room here. Does that apply to you? If you ever waited at a bus stop and you say, where is the bus? Is it coming or not? What's going on, right? So my project really dealt with the problem of uncertainty. I am really sorry to give you bad news. In the lower mainland, I cannot guarantee you that your bus will show up on time. Took my wife an hour and 40 minutes yesterday at 5 p.m. to take the kids home from swim class from the Steveston Arena, which is just east of Highway 99 and Steveston Highway, over to Steveston, which should be 12 minutes. Took her over an hour to get home. So I cannot guarantee you that my bus will show up on time. But you probably have a number of questions for which you would like to get an answer, right? Where is this bus right now? I'm standing at a stop, and I want to know where that bus is right now in relation to my stop. You probably want to know, more importantly, when is that bus coming to my stop, right? And equally important, if there's an accident on the landscape bridge in Dietmar in Georgia, and how, you want to know whether or not that bus is coming at all. In other words, whether or not it is canceled. And if you just see the taillights of that bus, you just missed it, you probably want to know, when is the next bus showing up at my stop? Or should I rather phone a cab and take a cab to my destination, right? So those are the questions that our customers, the 760,000 who use the bus service every single day, had on their minds. And that's why we did real-time transit. I am not a programmer, but I really believe in that statement. One of the reasons why we did Agile is we did not want to focus on technology. Was this a technology project? You betcha it was. But we wanted to focus on what the needs of the customers are, who's out there in the rain waiting for the bus. So real-time transit information is not a new concept. It really has been around, primarily in Europe, for quite some time. A little bit of history there is that all the buses are now equipped with GPS technology, which is about 15, 20 years old. Every single bus in the lower mainland that we operate, with the exception of 50 buses in the North Sea, which get it in about a month, they all have GPS on board, right? So why not use that GPS information and answer those 4 questions that I gave you earlier? We can do that, right? If we know every second of the day where the bus is, why not shoot that information out to a mobile website and tell our customers, where is your bus? When is it coming? And will it come, yes or no? So that's the focus of my project. So before I move on, I'm going to switch to a little YouTube video. I'm going to show you 90-second quick video of what the project in the end delivered.
Want to know when the next bus leaves your stop? If you have a mobile device, then step into the exciting new features of m.translink.ca. m.translink.ca gives you quick and easy access to real-time transit information, transit schedules, trip planning, fare information, alerts, and more, all on your mobile device. There are several ways to find out exactly when your next bus is departing your stop. 1. Enter your route, choose your direction, then pick your stop. Now you'll know exactly where your bus is and when the next one is set to leave. If you think you might miss it, no problem, because you will also know when the next few buses will be leaving. 2. If you know your bus stop number, then it's even easier. Simply enter the stop number and you'll have all the information for buses at that stop instantly. 3. If you're in an unfamiliar area or want to make it really easy, you can search by current GPS location and find all the options close to you. You'll see a countdown to predicted bus departure times with an automatic refresh every 30 seconds. If you travel the same route often, save your most common stops in a favorite section, so your nearest bus departure time is always just one click away. There's even a map view, so you can see your bus's real-time location and follow it as it makes its way to you. With all these great new features, you can be on time, all the time, and in the know with m.translink.ca.
Just said I can be on time all the time.
I don't know about that.
I can tell you how late your bus is. There's certain things that technology cannot address. Really apologize for that. So that was a video that we did at the end of the project with the launch of version 1.0, as you can imagine. That was a long road to get to that point. This was a high-stake project. Number one, my executive board was very curious and interested in this. Business Technology Services had actually promised this solution to go live prior to the Olympics. And I was called in to be the PM in March 2011. There was a lot riding on Ian, our CEO, Sandra, our VP HR, Doug Kelsey, our COO, Hayden, our President Skytrain, Bob Baden, my project sponsor, he's the Executive Vice President, Customer Public Relations, and Fred Cummings, President of Skytrain. There was a lot riding on this project, and it was really high profile. But you know what? Here at the end, it was really about that picture. It was about the customers out there at the bus stop wanting to get answers to those 4 questions. Yes, it was high stake. Yes, there was a lot of stakeholder engagement with the board executive, but at the end of the day, it was really about our customers. So I am not an Agile expert. Yeah? I'm not a Scrum Master. I'm a project manager who managed an Agile project. So I'm not here to teach you about Agile. I want to answer some questions related to why did you do this project Agile? First thing that comes to mind is we had to ensure that we delivered incremental value throughout the project that was visible to all our stakeholders. And frankly, we were just not able to afford a 6-month requirement phase, an 8-month development phase, and only then would my customers and my board and my executives see what value we delivered. We had to ensure that there was time-boxed incremental value delivery on the project. Number 2, this was a very high-profile public project. How can you develop a website for customers who use this out at the bus stop in the rain and don't solicit their feedback and react to their feedback? We had to ensure that we were able to instantly react to the feedback that they gave us. I had to make sure that there was a product owner who steered the project. And we in BTS, Business Technology Services, delivered on the vision and the priorities of the product owner. The product owner was our marketing manager. And also a key reason for me is that I thought it was the best means to keep the team and all the stakeholders engaged throughout this project, which, as I said earlier, was going on for about a year. It was a very user-centered design approach, heavy focus on UI, UX. And I don't think I could have done a project that's so heavy UI, UX focused without an Agile approach that allowed us to instantly react to what customers told us about the system. So in summary, this was the first project that I did in Agile, and I am 100% convinced had we done this project in the typical waterfall type approach, we would have failed miserably. And that's what we did it in Agile. Any questions so far?
What the feedback loops with the public or with the bus drivers? Or
I'm going to cover that in one of the learnings in some of the next slides. Yeah, will be very, very important. Okay, so I want to take you through 8 learnings that I take away from this project. I know that this sounds pretty catchphrasy, right? You could say this for any project, but I really, really mean it. And Steve talked a lot about this morning. There's just no way that you can deliver an Agile project without having a really strong team behind you. No way. I want to talk a little bit about what team we used. This is a busy work chart, and it speaks to the theme of the conference, which is Agile across the organization, right? Obviously, in the next slide, I'm going to focus on the Agile team and the product ownership group. The project was sponsored by the EVP Custom and Public Engagement. Very high in the organization. He dealt with, the board, reporting into the board, frequent updates. He was a great visionary and 100% behind the project. It was awesome. The project director was our manager of enterprise marketing, who also functioned as the product owner. She was really instrumental in prioritizing and telling us what to do when in the sprint. We had a number of parallel teams that worked in parallel. It was a design team. There was what we call the current state analysis team. They analyzed the readiness of the underlying technology components. We had an infrastructure team, dealing with the servers, all of that stuff. And then in the Agile context, we had the Agile delivery team. And that team consisted of 7 people, full-time, seconded to the project throughout the entire duration of the project. So we had a interface developer, it's a BSA. We had 2 web developers. It was really the creation of a primarily mobile website. We had 1 application developer, 1, UI UX expert, a business analyst, and 1 full-time QA analyst. And they worked in tandem very closely with the product ownership group. So there was an ownership group. There was a group, manager of marketing, the manager of corporate communications, an e-consultant, a marketing specialist, and so on. How we worked with them, I'm going to talk a little bit more later. We had a dedicated Scrum Master. One emergency that hit me was that Scrum Master was fired 2 weeks before my development phase on the project started. Talk about an unknown project risk. We brought in an external Scrum Master. He was certified. He was awesome. He led us to the first public release, Beta 01. And then my in-house developers took turns acting as Scrum Masters over 2-month durations. They each took on 4 sprints, and then they handed it over to the next developer, who then ran with the next 4 sprints, and so on. Right? This was a big thing. They're all unionized employees. So we had to work through, public sector constraints, the issues around compensation, right? Overtime. Then now moving into a leadership management role, you have to, you have to work within the confines of the collective agreement, all of that. Right? But we were able to work through that. We had a dedicated QA analyst on the team over a period of 1 year. Very, very important. And there was a heavy, heavy focus on UI and UX. That UI UX expert was part of the Scrum team. Lesson number 2. That's my project team. Almost everyone. They were absolutely awesome. You gotta protect your team from wannabe experts in the region. I'm gonna read out some feedback that we got as we rolled this out, real life feedback that came in from Twitter. Just bear with me. So first feedback was, this is my first time using the new TransLink mobile site, and you know what? It's pretty rad. Yep, I said, it's rad. That's my favorite new toy this time back to school season. Really awesome, right? Great feedback. Next one. Thanks. You and the new site are likely the best parts about my transit in Metro Vancouver. Next one. Oh my goodness, thank you, I really appreciate it. That's great. Thanks. It really makes it easier. Thanks. I love the changes you made. Sweet. I've been wanting this option for a while. Reassuring, positive feedback, right? It's really good. I'm impressed with the next bus upgrade. It said my bus was coming in 9 minutes and it arrived 9 minutes later. Bravo. I'm in love with the predictive departure times on the mobile side. Also, I love how it now updates every 30 seconds instead of only 2 minutes. So far, pretty good, right? Okay, next comment. TransLink, please, please, please bring back normal text. Right, so there was the debate raging, should we have a countdown in minutes to the predictive departure time of the bus? Your next bus shows up in 28 minutes. Or your next bus departs at 3:05 p.m. Right? That was the debate. Which led to this comment. Next to comments. You guys totally screwed my bookmarks up. Did you guys test anything? And the last one was, good job TransLink for making your mobile site completely perplexing and totally useless. It was perfect before. Relative bus times? Seriously? There are a lot of experts in the region who apparently know a lot about TransLink, much more than we do. My job as a project manager is to shield and protect the team from those negative comments. And that's the point I think that Steve made in the morning. You gotta have a really thick skin to work at TransLink.
But where do you draw the line between shielding your team from negative comments and taking feedback from people who are ultimately your customers?
You're taking feedback obviously seriously, and I'm going to get into the next learning here how we did this. Very, very important. But if somebody basically says with a comment like that, you know what, you guys are completely useless. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, you can say, there might be a problem with our bookmarks. You don't need to give them that level of detail.
Yeah. We got comments like, you guys don't know what you're doing. This is a throwaway toy. Forget it. So you have a team who is full-time seconded to this project, has been working the heart out, and then you get that comment on Twitter. So the lesson for me was, as a PM, I really need to protect my Agile team, enable them to deliver, and shield them from that negative feedback. And take the feedback for what it's worth, and then run with the relevant feedback and improve it in the next sprint.
His words might be not very well worded, but he's trying to say something.
Yep.
Did you get to what he's trying to say?
Absolutely. Yep. So let me elaborate on this a little bit. So my steering committee was made up of CIO, EVP sponsor, manager corporate marketing, EVP planning, director technology planning, and me as the PM reporting into them. And that was this really healthy debate. Should we have a countdown in minutes to the next departure time? Or should we have the absolute time in our minutes? Product owner, steering committee said, no, it should be a countdown. It should say it leaves in 28 minutes. Okay. Beta release X went out with that feature in place. That's when we got that feedback. What did we do? We had other customers who said, I want the countdown. What do? Well, we put the cookie in our app on the phone and allowed our customers to set the preference. And now they can choose either way, and they can have the best of the world that they choose. So we incorporated that feedback, right? But we just had to have a thick skin not to be upset by comments that are very, under the belt critical stuff. Right?
But surely, if you just mean the language is negative, you don't need to be a translator. If you have internet, you know what it's like to read online comments.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything special about.
No, but if we put a release out, right, and I'm going to talk about how we manage the feedback later, and we get 50 Twitter messages and 30 are completely negative like this, then my job as a PM is to say, team, it's all good. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't listen to that noise. We take it with a grain of salt and move on.
Don't
That's what
listen
I
to
mean.
that noise. Welcome to the internet.
Sure.
Well, but we're not just talking about the internet. I mean, I also protect my team from a sales guy that's complaining about some bugs, and I don't want him approaching my team directly. Or, I mean, there's tons of different examples of negativity coming into the team that's not useful for the team.
Okay, next, learning. A lot of what I'm covering here is very well known to you. Don't compromise on sprint discipline. Very, very important. So this is the landing page for our mobile site to be created. We had a strong product owner.
Hey, just briefly, I'm having a Harry Potter moment here following my local bus on that map thing. That's absolutely awesome, actually.
Great.
This is really nice.
Do me a favor and don't share the URL, otherwise everybody will be doing this and don't follow my slides. That's what happened when I present to the board. They were tracking their kids' bus on their cell phone and my presentation was gone. So, product owner. We had a product ownership group. It was 4 or 5 people. I mentioned the members earlier. They spoke with one voice. That was really, really important, right? You guys prioritize within your group, and then you speak into the Scrum team with one voice. Very important. And they really were empowered to prioritize. I mean, that's where the buck stopped, and that's what we did in the sprint. We delivered a sprint every 2 weeks. There was a fixed release date every Thursday, 2 weeks later, not on a Friday, because if issues we didn't want to deal with it on the weekend, every other Thursday there was a sprint release. Only 2 exceptions. We had one 3-week sprint over the Christmas holidays for obvious reasons, and one 3-week sprint just to tie in more things prior to version 1 launch. So it was very, very much time boxed. We held very regular demos of what we built with the product owner in every sprint, with the steering committee, and also with our custom information department. If you have a question about TransLink or Transit, what bus do I need to take to go out to UBC, that's the department you call. They were key stakeholders. This system transformed the way they talk to customers. So we validated what we built in every sprint by demoing it to those groups. Again, Agile across the enterprise is the concept here. And we obviously took no compromise on doing sprint planning meetings. The product owner was unfortunately not co-located. Was a 15-minute SkyTrain right away. But there was still, everybody else in the Scrum team was co-located. But there was a lot of face-to-face between the product owner and the Scrum team, and the product owner was always there in the planning session. And everybody on the team obviously thought that the plan that they developed was really achievable in the sprint, the next 2 weeks. So I'm going to get into a slide here that maybe some of you guys don't agree with me, but I'm a firm believer in this. I think that there is a real danger out there that you use Agile as an excuse for not doing proper project planning. And what I mean by project planning is that you're planning the project and you monitor it and you control it from initiation to closeout. I have seen a number of projects at TransLink where I felt that Agile was used as a total excuse for not planning. It was really a bunch of mush. And I am a firm believer that you have to embed the Agile methodology into a sound, overall, holistic project management delivery. And for us, it's PMI. So how did this look for us? Next slide I'm going to show is a busy slide. I'm going to talk to you for a couple of minutes here. This is the overall project timeline. We had a March to end of April 2-month project initiation and planning phase. In that phase, we did what a good PM would be doing. Writing the charter, writing the project plan, putting a solid work breakdown structure in place, getting the contracts in place. Not so easy in the public sector. Gotta issue RFPs, gotta plan that in, otherwise you can't do the work. Get the sign-off, get the funding in place. All of that, and then wrap it up with kicking off the project. All of that had to be done before we moved into the execution phase, which was start to end Agile. On the closing end, no compromise. Every project had to be closed. A closeout report has to be written. It has to be financially closed. We have to do lessons learned. No compromise. Where Agile came in was in the execution phase of the project. And that's what I'm going to focus on now. So what did we do? We started with 4 private sprints. We called them alpha releases, right? So what did we do in those 4 sprints? Well, we established the infrastructure foundation, right? It had to be scalable. It had to be redundant. It had to be secure. It had to be highly transactional, etc., etc. We built a very, very simple but well-functioning UI. Very simple. The first thing we took out the door to the customers was very, very simple. But it was flawless and worked extremely well. We did all in-house user acceptance testing, completely private. We had no media campaign. We didn't announce it to anyone. No Twitter, no nothing. Completely low-key. And when the last alpha release was done, we promoted that alpha release to beta 01, and that went out to the public, and we opened up the URL. And then it was as simple as 1 tweet, no media release, nothing else. And we had about 1,500 to 2,000 hits on B01. That led us to 11 subsequent beta sprints. B01, my message was very, very small. It's just 01, very small. And then we had 11 2-week iterations to move to a full production-ready release 1.0, which we launched on April the 17th, 2012. So this 11 beta sprints lasted from September, mandated by the board. You gotta have this in place when the school comes back, first week in September, to April the following year. Right? It was, we started very small, and then we grew the solution, the UI, the features prioritized by the product owner throughout those 11 releases. And then when we went live, it was big bang. We had the media campaign, Twitter, the video that I showed you, then it was very, very public, right? Because then it was version 1.0. And after that, we moved into 2 more enhancement releases. We decided to have a 4-week sprint on those 2 releases. And then we moved into the next phase on the project, which is here. And what we did is that we created an API, and we allowed developers to come in. We did a developer bootcamp. 15, 20 guys showed up. And we then released that data through a secure, highly functional API to all the developers and said, subscribe for free. Here's our data. Go nuts developing your own apps. Just don't call it next bus, because that's our trademark. It was one of the very few stipulations. And since then, there are now, I don't know, 20, 25 mobile apps out there using our data, right? And then the project closed.
Question.
Sure.
So when you said you embedded the Agile part, the development phase, into the overall, the larger project, which is the previous PMI, and traditional Agile is used to the whole thing that including within a sprint, including research, requirements, testing, deployment. I understand why you did it, like you mentioned it. There's a public sector, you need to negotiate deals, you need to deal with the union, you need to follow reports. That's all fair point, but it kind of seeing, did you, but you also said you're a firm believer in this, then did you do it because you wanted to or because you had no choice? And like sometimes
The answer is very simple and unequivocally because I 100 believed in it. I now manage the PMO at TransLink within Business Technology Services, and you cannot get away managing a project without doing all of this and all of this. No charter, no project. No project plan, no project. No WBS, no
Is that
project.
because that's what the laws are, or the union rules are? Like who
No,
says those
no,
requirements?
because those are well-established, very well-working foundational project management principles that you should define the business case and write a charter before you roll up your sleeves and do the work. So I call that very foundational project management stuff. And so the lesson that for me here is that Agile should not replace that.
How far did you take your work breakdowns sheet? Because how did you connect the two between going to Agile?
So what we did is in this phase here, okay, no, actually let me say, right here during sprint 1, we did the foundational requirements. So my BA went out and conducted about 30 interviews with stakeholders across the organization, as well as external customers, and collected the baseline requirements. And then the overall WBS and schedule was then developed based on those requirements. And then all the details, all the UI, UX was then managed in the Agile sprints using a Agile tool, Pivotal Tracker, which we used. So did we incorporate all the details from the Agile sprints into that WBS? No, absolutely not. But we said we have 11 releases during that beta phase. That's how far we took it.
So just in my experience working in the services industry, a lot of companies that say they're running projects Agile are more than likely running it this way. So often terms are used hybrid. Scrum Fall is a popular term for this. But to me that's always it's an educational piece of the component, I guess, is to sort of, because in services clients will be like, oh, I've heard of this buzzword Agile. We should do Agile because I've heard it produces better results and it's going to get me what I want for cheaper and faster. And you have to, sort of re-educate clients and say, well, it's not necessarily cheaper or faster. In fact, it could be the opposite. But then because there's all those other factors even though projects that are run so-called Agile typically are run as more of a Scrum Fall. So this is actually a very good diagram to represent Scrum Fall as a methodology, in my opinion.
Yeah. So for me, the takeaway there was it's not either or. It was sound overall initiation to closer project management, well-established principles, and move Agile into that context.
I mean, to me, the great irony right now, or not irony, I don't know what the right word is, the great mystery to me in Agile is that most, in my experience, in the real world, a lot of projects are run more as a Scrum Fall, yet all the books out there are on either traditional PMI, Waterfall, or Agile, and there's not really any books out there on Scrum Fall yet. That's kind of what the real world is running as.
Yeah. Good point.
So when you wrote your project plan, did you have the schedule of the 11 sprints laid out as to the time and cost of that, and then talking about how many sprints before you got to version 1? Was that in your project plan, and did it happen that way?
It happened that way, yeah. So what we did obviously at the beginning of the project when we defined it, not defined, was what goes into each sprint. That's the prioritization that comes in from the product owner. But what we did do is we said, the board said, thou shalt deliver non-negotiable, you get fired if you don't, September 6, 2011, B01, non-negotiable. So if that timeline was non-negotiable, what I had to do is okay, product owner, what do we put in that B01 release to make the timeline? We hit that timeline. 6 a.m., September 7, 2011, the website was live. Then we chunked up the work into the 11 sprints, and then through the typical Scrum method product owner, we then defined what goes into those 11 releases, a release every other Thursday, leading to version 1.0, and then 2 more enhancement releases thereafter.
So did you have to reduce scope to make it fit the timeline?
No, we didn't. No, I'm actually, I don't want to brag.
Oh, go ahead.
But we've done a lot of best practice research in other transit agencies, New York, Chicago, Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles. What are they doing in that space? And I'm still convinced that we built the best website. I really am. And it was, again, only because we did it Agile. We got all that feedback from the customers. It has the most features by far in it, more than any feature you will see in any other site that the other agencies developed. And it was only because we were able to do it through Scrum.
So could you have delivered earlier if you cut Scrum?
Yes, but the customer was at a sprint. So the project closed. At least the caveat there. The version 1 was delivered on time. B01 was delivered on time. Version 1 was delivered on time. The API phase took 3 months longer because we had more underlying infrastructure work to do to get the data out. But B01 and version 1 delivered on time. I should maybe move on because I want to, if you don't mind, Greg has a really awesome project as well. So the power and the importance of user stories. When we developed our little system, we had those people in Chinatown in our mind. They're out there boarding the bus, and what do they want from our system? So what we did is we did a lot of wireframing, a lot of mock-ups, and it was all 100% user story. As a transit rider, I'm sitting at a bus stop, and I just missed my bus. I want to know when the next bus shows up that takes me to the same destination. Okay? We then wireframed it, we mocked it up, and then we developed it, start to finish. And we did, we obviously managed all of this in a Agile tool, and we just happened to pick one of those tools, which is Pivotal Track, which is the same tool that Greg used on his project. And it worked reasonably well for us. The estimating, the velocity and all this stuff worked reasonably well for us. So that Pivotal Tracker tool was our vehicle to prioritize with the product owner. I like this story. Direct interaction with your customer is key to success on an Agile project. So I wanted to meet one of my customers, Rob Sleeth. He's the Access Transit user. Sorry, this should say the Accessibility Transit User Advisory Council Chair. Rob is visually impaired. He has been blind as far as I know most of his life. But there's one thing about Rob that we didn't know. He is extremely tech savvy. So what happened is, 3 weeks before version 1 launch, my product owner brought him into the team room, had him on his arm, and here was Rob walking in with his guide dog. It was the most humbling moment I ever experienced on any of my projects. It was absolutely awesome to see the developers there and see that customer walking in. And then he said, "I've got a little problem with your system that I wanted to show you." We said, "What do you mean?" "Well, here's my iPhone." So he takes his iPhone out and he showed us the iPhone voiceover feature. So here were all the deck is sitting and said, "What's an iPhone voiceover feature?" You don't know that? Well, it's a little system that reads out screens, right? Well, obviously, nobody uses this because we don't have the challenge he has. So he turned it on, and we turned to our homepage, and the homepage was designed like that. Enter bus route or stop ID. Turn his iPhone on, reads it out, and read it out, enter bus route or stop Idaho. Oops, that is the two-digit symbol for a US state, and he was wrong, rather amused or confused. So what we obviously did in the next sprint, we scrapped that and we replaced the ID with the hash sign, which then read out bus stop number. Right? I really like that story because had we not brought Rob in, had he not shown that feature to us, we would have never, ever incorporated that into the release. So that direct feedback, interaction with the customer was really important. Two more learnings. How did we manage the feedback that we got from our customers? A couple of points. So we actually solicited 6 beta testers through Craigslist and Buzzerblog, which is our social media platform at Translate. Right? And yes, we offered them some incentives, free transit pass, $20 certificate for Starbucks, whatever. Right? And we brought them in, and they were pilot users, giving us direct feedback. And how we did this, I'm going to talk in the next slide. We posted regularly on our Buzzerblog site and through other social media channels during our beta release. It was very low-key, no splash, no media campaign, no video, very low-key. Right? We always tried to really downplay this. It's just B03. Don't expect any bells and whistles. It's not release 1 yet. Very low-key. But then when we moved it into version 1.0, then there was the big media campaign, right? So we identified one department in TransLink that had more interaction with our customers than any other department, and that's the customer information department. They talk to the customer all day long. Well, what better department can you have as a stakeholder to be your customer voice into the department? So we asked them to compile initially daily feedback reports that customers brought in. Twitter, phone calls, emails, commendations and complaints, all of it was compiled. We got that report every night, and then we took that, we talked it through with the product owner, and then as applicable, we moved it into the next sprint, which is the next slide, the next bullet here. And again, the focus was incremental delivery of value, right? We started really small, and then we built out that value over the 11 beta releases. We under-promised. We tried to over-deliver. So this might sound a little bit confusing. Obviously, you have the requirements that you agreed to in a sprint internally with the product owner, and what is agreed to, that's what you deliver. But externally, right? We really downplayed it during the beta phase. Oh, it's September 2011, it just shows you the location of the bus. Does not yet show you the predictive time. We really downplayed it, but then we tried to deliver more than the customers expected. And we always ensured that what we put out to the customers was rock solid, no errors, no bugs, and then we kept the momentum going and built on that foundation. And what we did is on the homepage on our website, nbeta.translink.ca, which is the site, we always advertised a quick one-sentence snapshot of the core new feature that we put out in the next release. Predictive departure times are now available, or you can now save favorites, whatever, right? And then we explained it in a little bit more detail, very interactive, accordion-style help, what those features were all about. Last lesson, validate user-centered design through solid UAT. makes a lot of sense, right? How can you shoot anything out without doing user acceptance testing? How did we do it? So it started with a solid test plan. We were not able to do this just by winging it. We had to have a really solid plan in place how we test it. So as I said earlier, we recruited 6 beta testers through Craigslist and Doerschlag. We did this early on in the project, and we did it more than just once. We had several rounds of user acceptance testing. Those are just 2 guys that came in. What we did is we had one user that knew absolutely nothing about TransLink. So we put the iPhone in front of him and said, okay, go to mb.translink.ca, and you are now at Broadway and Commercial, and you're going to UBC. Find how real-time transit works. Okay. So this is the scenario, right? It's a customer out there who just hears about our website, has never used it. He's an experienced transit user. Use it. You tell me how it works. This guy, he knew more about transit than 90% of TransLink employees. The guy knew everything. Like, it was absolutely amazing. Like, he had the whole system down. Oh, if I don't take the 22, then I can walk over to that stop and I can take the 39, and that still takes me to the same destination. He's an awesome tester. Great feedback. We hired in a strong UI UX expert, Elizabeth, to really guide us and facilitate that whole UI UX experience, that UAT, right? We developed scripts. So we set the user down, we had a script that we followed, and we actually recorded all the sessions with the little camera. And it was a joint effort. So in those sessions, we had a developer, the UI UX expert, and the product owner present together with the customer. Right? So it was not just my BA. We had the developer present, so they could firsthand see what the feedback was from the customer. And then we were very open, and we shared the results from those UAT sessions on our Doerschlag website. Right? And this is a little write-up of what our customers told us. Right? So that's the end of my segment. Next time you take a bus, try it out. It really works. The accuracy that we achieved was, it's 90% accurate within 2 minutes. Okay? It cannot get more accurate than that unless you throw many millions of dollars against the radio infrastructure. I always heard that Stockholm, they're getting bus updates every second. We would have to put a lot more repeater sites up in the Lower Mainland to make that happen, which would then increase the accuracy to maybe 96%. Clearly, there's no funding to do that. So 90%, 2 minutes is what we achieved, and my project sponsor said, that's good enough, and then we closed the project. Okay, so I'd like to move it over to Greg for the second full Agile project we ran, and that's a project that was it's just now wrapping up, and it's very different. It is in-house focused. It really is a solution for our employees, not for the external customers. Thanks.